officially put away my sweats.
Well, you might want to get them back out because it's supposed to be cool over the weekend. Welcome aboard.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
rain?
it is. Yeah. Welcome aboard. Today is May 28th, 2021. It's a Friday. This is the Crushing Iron Podcast, and we are episode 481.
481, man.
Yeah, dude, you know not to put away the hoodies and the sweatpants until 2 weeks after Chat 70.3 because we always get really pleasant weather in the lead up, and then it's an absolute hellacious furnace the week of. And then I think I saw tomorrow here in Chattanooga. I think you guys are gonna hate this. It's high tomorrow of 69 and a low of 50. And then a high on Sunday of 76 and a low of 51, perfectly sunny, which is basically like the most ideal, perfect race conditions you can imagine. But hey, you know what? If you've done Chattanooga at all ever, either the full or the half, you know that don't even consider like taking the weather seriously the 2 weeks before or the week after. It's going to be hot here. And then it was awesome. But we've recovered for the most part. That's why we're coming to you a little bit delayed. On Friday, we played a little bit of catch up. We had a huge last weekend here where we are based out of in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We have our hub here. We have our office here. We do it all from here. We had the big race this last weekend. We had 50-plus athletes come into town. We had athletes also racing in Tulsa and all over the place. And we had an absolute blast. We got to meet a lot of you awesome listeners that came in that were also competing. Some of you were just traveling in and came in to say hi. So we enjoyed it. I loved meeting everybody, but it took us a good 3 to 4 days to kind of recover, get caught up on all the action that went on, and now we're back. So if it's your first time tuning in, welcome.
Back.
Yeah, we're back. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general. We cover all things triathlon and a whole lot of life. We'll cover everything in between from both Mike and I's perspective. Oftentimes we'll use our athletes' perspective. All of our coaches work with a wide range of athletes that participate in this sport at a very high level, and then just athletes that are kind of getting going. And so, but for the most part, we all participate in this thing called life, and triathlon just kind of works its way into it. It can be good, it can be bad, it can be difficult, and also it all can be awesome. So we do our best to kind of have a conversation around that. Sometimes we'll hop into our Facebook group and let the conversation there, kind of the vibe of the community drive the podcast, and that is Crushing Iron Group on Facebook. If you want to be a part of that, answer one simple question, we'll let you right in. We'll occasionally do a swim, bike, run, detailed podcast, race recaps, like we did on Tuesday, race previews, the rare, I can't even say occasionally anymore, the rare guest that we'll have on. But for the most part, Mike and I, as best friends, coaches, and athletes ourselves, just kind of sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about it all. And today, I think, as we sat down and had a very serious pre-podcast meeting, we already have a topic going for today, which is really rare, but more the mental side, which we always tend to get, a lot of feedback on our How to Not Suck series, which Mike does an awesome job of that. Obviously, we have 479 other podcasts that we've done as we inch our way closer to 500, which seems kind of insane.
Almost halfway home.
I know. Yeah, we both officially decided that we were going to retire at Podcast 1000. We're just going to be done. So soak us in, baby, because you only got a couple more years left. But no, in all seriousness, go back and enjoy those, and we will cover detail. But a lot of times we get a lot of awesome feedback on covering the mental and emotional side of the sport, because no matter how detailed and how data-driven and analytical you can be with your training and with your analysis and your projections and how you think the race day is going to go, and none of it matters if you can't make it happen mentally. And that's where a lot of athletes, I think, tend to, I don't want to say fail because that's not the right word, just to falter or maybe come up short in what they could do performance-wise. So I think we'll go back and do that today. But I also want to give... Again, send you guys over to our Instagram page, which is now actually something that's lively.
The words out of my mouth.
No, I saw you itching over there. We actually have had an Instagram for a while. We haven't ever used it. I'm maybe on Instagram. Mike, would sporadically put a few things in there, but now Summer has come on board, and a longtime athlete of ours, and taken over all things social media and operations and kind of team management, basically. And it is from what I hear, I don't really know, I'm not on it, but from what I understand from all the feedback, it is lively and awesome and informative. So if you want to follow us on Instagram and honestly, just to kind of see what we're doing and what all the things that being a part of C26 entails in the community, from athlete highlights to the athlete of the week, camps, everything. It's C26_triathlon. I think you can just search Crushing Iron, follow that. Obviously, you can follow us on Facebook, and you can hop over to our website, which is c26triathlon.com. It is 100% our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and really the greatest thing that we have, which is our community. Our athletes and our people are the greatest asset that we have. You can get more info on all the coaches that we have, camps, hub visits, the condo. We've had a lot of inquiries this week on swim analysis. And I want to say that before we hop into the cast, in terms of swim analysis, I think a lot of people think that, you only need to come in and get in the endless pool if you're a beginner athlete and you have, a lot of, low-hanging fruit, if you will, to pick up in the pool, which a lot of people do, because as complicated as swimming is, and it is, like that's something I say in almost every swim analysis is, swimming is simple. I say that, but if it was, I wouldn't have a job. But it's overcomplicated. But when you have something that's so technique-driven like swimming, it's not like, cycling and running where you can change, your gait or your cycling, mechanics and have like a, a huge difference in drop. But in swimming, you can change 2 or 3 things technique-wise, lower your effort, and get faster and more efficient at the same time. That's why there's so much low-hanging fruit there if you know what you do. But it's not just for beginners. We've had professionals in here. We've had beginners who barely know how to swim. I know we've had a couple inquiries lately from athletes on the podium at 70.3 races who are tired of being the hunter and wouldn't mind being the hunted. If you know how that feels to come off. I've never known what that feels like to be the hunter. I always feel hunted down and then passed because it sucks. I usually come out of the water pretty close to the top and then I just get passed all day long, which isn't a great feeling, but I'm working on that. But it would be fun to come out of the water up and not have to catch everyone on the bike run. So if you want more info on that, camps that we have that are still available or anything, hub, or even our gear, which we got a lot of those in, you can always email c26operations@gmail.com.
Okay.
Would you put that in one of my top 3 best ever opens in the past 480?
I don't know, man.
That was pretty strong.
You kind of stole my thunder.
Sorry about that. I just got on a roll and I just didn't want to stop.
It might be your best. It's probably my worst. So I don't know what to say about that right now. I got
Mike. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
I do have to say, man. I get a kick out of it. Yesterday I was on the bike and I just lately we've been kind of doing this thing to each other, like walking by, like you walked by me and you didn't even look at me. You just kind of went, he's back. He's back. He walked right out. We've been saying that to each other because, inching our way back. Inching our way back. I think you're a little bit more of a groove than I am.
But I don't know. You seem to be in a pretty, and listen, it's hard to be in a groove. And I'm always we're both pretty transparent about this with our athletes. Being a coach and doing what we do, it's hard to find the balance of investing so much in your athletes, but also making sure you're investing time in yourself. And I think after races, we both get kind of re-energized from our athletes, but also now that racing is full on back and just put a little bit of pep in your step, a little bit of fire has been lit.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And, I was actually trying to practice what I preached yesterday. It was an endurance ride, like an hour and a half on the trainer or the watt bike. And
just endurance? Because I heard some huffing and puffing.
I know, but see, that's the thing. It was some pops, right? I went an hour clean and, just stayed right in the zone too. And was just feeling good and trying to find my pedal stroke and just be consistent with it. And then towards after an hour, I decided to throw in 15 minutes worth of one-on, one-offs. Mm-hmm. At the same, I didn't change gears or,
you just use higher cadence.
I just went cadence.
I heard you. You could hear the wind in here.
You could hear could you feel the wind?
I could feel I shut the door. There was a draft.
But I think that kind of segues into what we were talking about a little bit. I didn't overdo it. I felt great when I got done. I just did a little bit, but I pushed those cadences because a lot of people are, I don't. You probably get this all the time too. The high cadence workouts, and I can't go 120 or 110 or whatever it is. And I always say neither can I. But I find what I can go, and then I sort of readjust my cadence scale based on that. I mean, you can't do what you can't do, right? And I always say, if you can do 120, but you're completely all over the bike and just everything you got to do it, I don't know if that's the way to go about it. So let's set that at 110 or something for your highest high of the cycle. But anyway, I was just trying to Honestly, I'm at a point now where I got a lot of time, but not a lot of time. But I'm just trying to flirt with the pain a little bit, or flirt with the edge a little bit, and just remind myself, because I'm such a big feel guy that I want to get it out there. I want to start feeling it in my quads. I just want to start feeling like, okay, can you hold this? Can you hold this, or whatever? And like playing around with those sort of edges. But I was talking to several athletes that, after our last podcast about the digging deep, and a lot of them said, I don't think I dig deep enough, and I think that's probably true for a lot of us, and I think that for me, that starts on these trainer rides and in the pool, because it's the safest place to flirt with that, rather than always wanting to run fast.
It is 100% the best place to flirt with digging. Digging yourself a hole isn't the right way to put it, but flirting with that, with being really, really uncomfortable in somewhat of a safe space. Like swimming and cycling, it's no impact. You're not going to hurt yourself. And to be honest, like that's a reason why, I've had that same conversation now that racing is back. And I think that, we mentioned this on Tuesday's race recap, was that you could see it on a lot of athletes' faces. They're like, I forgot how hard this was. But a lot of that obviously was attributed just, for the last year and a half, but also the heat of the day, but also probably a lack of preparation, but I think one of the biggest things is understanding and recognizing the strengths that you have within being uncomfortable, or if you want to call it pain, whatever you want to call it. A lot of athletes do well at one and don't do well at the other. Like I have a lot of athletes who are very willing and very capable to dig deep 30 seconds, minute, because they know it's almost over, but they can dig really, really deep for short periods of time, up to 4 minutes. And I've got other athletes who can't really go that level, but do really, really well between 4 to 12 minutes, because it's achievable. I know it's almost going to be over, but then it's over, but it's not too hard to, I feel like, my heart's going to beat out of my chest. And then you have athletes who just do better, that don't do better with those, but do better with very long, just kind of grind it out, resilient, which is what I consider myself. I've always done better at just grinding. Tempo runs are where I always feel like I'm at my best at. I can just find a spot that's pretty uncomfortable and stay there. On the other end, you have a lot of athletes who hate doing tempo runs or anything, or especially in the pool, because it's just barely uncomfortable enough that you can do it for a long time. But that's also why in specific, blocks, that it's so important to do, because for a lot of it, that's what racing is you're just over the line of, this is just kind of, again, like I call zone 3, the tattoo zone. It's just annoyingly uncomfortable, but you can withstand it for hours. It's not. It's just one of those things that you can, but it's the length of time, right? That is I just don't know if I want to be. I'd rather suffer hard for 4 minutes than feel like I can go 45 at this pace, because it takes so much mental focus to continue and stay there, because all you got to do is slow down a little bit, right? The other ones, you're kind of watching the clock. You're like, it's almost over. It's almost over. Where if you're doing a long tempo or some harder, longer intervals on the bike, or even 300, 400, 800s in the pool, you're like, I've got a ways, but I know I can do it. So I just got to keep doing it. And I think and again, a lot of athletes, in my opinion, would be so much better off testing themselves in the pool, because most athletes don't. That's just the fact. A large majority of triathletes just woefully undertrained in the swim, either because they don't feel confident, they don't know what they're doing, they haven't had the appropriate technique work to feel like they can actually accomplish anything. They've gotten so frustrated that because they haven't improved, so they no longer put any time in. They just kind of avoid the pool and go once a week, and then they're never going to get any better. And then when they get in the pool, they don't push themselves, because and this is coming from a long time swimmer, when I work the hardest at intervals, it's always in the pool. I'm never as gassed as I am when I'm in the pool doing intervals, nowhere else. Because it's a whole body and you're so anaerobic, and it's not like you can exhale and breathe perfectly. It's hard. So most athletes tend to shy away. That's one of the first things that a lot of athletes say when they start working with us, because we're not swim heavy. I think we're swim appropriate. Is that they're like, I haven't swum this hard before. We're like, right. Well, get used to it, because that's what we do. You swim hard to prepare, but it also translates to cycling and running. They all overlap. And I think that's a piece of the puzzle that a lot of athletes ignore, as we've discussed before on the cast, is that swim, bike, and run training all complement each other. And so if you're just being lazy and not taking advantage of your time in the pool, you're not just affecting your swim, but you're also removing the opportunity to increase fitness on your cycling, your running, because it's not like when you go swimming, you swim a bunch and you hop on the bike, your body's like, all right, now engage only bike fitness. It all translates over. And there's obviously, specifics around all three sports, but they all benefit each other. And so when you get in the pool, practice working hard. If you're on the bike, practice working hard, digging deep, digging really deep. An athlete comment the other day, I don't know. I'm afraid to go 100%. And I was like, why? Why like, I feel like I'll have to give up. And I'm like, well, then let's figure that out. Like figure that exactly where that is, because because a lot of times once you do it, you're like, that wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I wasn't destroyed, right? If you have, a decent amount of fitness base, you're not going to do a session and be destroyed for a week. That's, if you've been consistent, that's why when athletes start, you're not like, here, let's do 5 track workouts this week and 3, high threshold intervals on the bike, and let's see what we got. Because you're just going to destroy people. They don't have the cake to do it. You should have a good enough base to do it so you can recover. But I think the first step is, is understanding and recognizing, like, where do you feel like your pitfalls are in reaching that uncomfortable spot? And is it because you're just generally afraid of the actual pain and discomfort associated with these hard intervals? Or, and I find this more and more and more typical with triathletes, especially when there's been a huge long buildup like most people have, is that I'm afraid that if I do go all the way in, I'm still going to fall short of my expectations. Mm-hmm. And then what is that going to tell me? What message is that going to send to me, that you put all this work in and you have these expectations, whether they're, legit expectation or you just pulled them out of out of nowhere. And what's that going to do to my psyche? Or can I just keep telling myself, well, you just didn't have it today, or so let's try it again next time. A lot of athletes, it's more of a mental and emotional thing. It's more of they're protecting, I think, your ego in a way, to not go full on, because they're afraid to in them, it's like epically fail or bonk. And then what's going to happen? Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? You go out and you find your limit, or you decide to keep underachieving and not figuring that out because you're trying to play it safe the whole entire time. Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to the swim for a second, because like you're saying, I always talk to people that I raced with over the years or whatever, and we always say, like, kind of, subconsciously towards the end of maybe Ironman or half training or whatever, once it seems like that most people get serious about their swim like 2 months out, and it's like, oh, shit, I better get this together or whatever. And we always talk about how the swim feels like it pulls everything together. And I think that has a lot to do with the overall body work that you get in the water, and that, you're pulling it's like your legs are getting all this work all the time. And now finally your upper body's kind of like, okay, now we can connect to the bottom and work through the core and everything like that. And I think swimming does that for you. It's interesting. I used to do a lot of mountain biking, and I think that I've talked about that, and I've talked about how I feel like my baseball career has given me that ability to suck it up and push through that pain, because every, it's 6th inning, 8th inning, double headers, you got to get off that bench and just kind of keep going again. It's sort of, to me, is like interval training, because you got to just find a way to get out there and find more energy. So, but when I was mountain biking a lot, or when I started, I should say, when I got into it, I was like, man, how am I going to, like, we did this 40-mile off-road race up in northern Wisconsin. It was a Fat Tire Festival. And one of the guys I happened to meet that week or whatever was giving me some tips. He said, just keep spinning. It's like that spin class. Mm-hmm. If you concentrate on spinning, instead of like getting out, he said, don't get in your head. He goes, just think about keeping it going. And for whatever reason, that sort of sunk in this way. It's sort of like, I feel like that's what long intervals are like, or 20-minute ride, or like you're out on the bike. To me, that's what I always just think about. I'm like, man, I don't know if I got this in me. And then I just start focusing on my pedal spin, and then it just becomes, it sort of gets out of my head a little bit and keeps pushing on. And it's like back to that ride I did yesterday, which is interesting because I had a gear for my zone 2 and I was pushing that, and then like you said, I was up in the cadence. And the most interesting part of doing that is when you don't gear down coming back to take a break. So you come back to that place where it's not like tough, but it's like on the edge of, zone 2, upper zone 2 or something like that. And so you have to, you're going really fast. So the pedaling is easier. It's harder on your cardiovascular, but then you have to sort of ease back into that same resistance and go slower. And it's a really interesting thing to experience, I think. I think there's got to be something good in there for it. I don't know what that is necessarily, but I can just tell when you're doing it. It's like you have to sort of slow down and just sort of refocus into that pocket.
And it's hard to do in running too. Like, when you go like a different, like if you look at zone 3 or zone 4 and you come back into like a zone, if you do zone 3 or 4, like one of the runs that we do a lot, if we're doing tempo, is like, 20 minute, 25 minute zone 2, and then like a middle effort is like zone 3. And then almost every single time, like when the remainder is like just chilling out zone 2, everyone's faster. Everything's all of a sudden just like sped up. Whether it's their legs faster, they're more warmed, or I think it's just perceived effort has now been changed because you've gone 1-2 levels up from what you normally run. Then when you go back down, it's not going back down to where you were before. It's kind of going back to now your new normal, which is your new uncomfortable, kind of like reset.
Yeah.
And people do the same thing on the bike. Like, you see a lot of athletes that like, they'll smash it and then like they come back down and their strongest, like, if they do 15, 20 minutes in the beginning and then 15, 20 minutes at the end, a lot of them are almost stronger on the last after the hard intervals. And I generally don't think it's because they're some athletes want to see their average power drop or normalized power drop. But a lot of times it's just because you've had your perceived effort or your feel and your threshold baseline has just been, the goalposts have been moved, right?'re no longer doing like your easy, like, I don't want to inch up a little more. Then once you do and you scale back down, you usually come back down like 1 or 2 spots above where your old baseline was, because you just went so uncomfortable. Now your new level of comfort is like a little bit stronger, a little bit harder, a little bit fresher.
Yeah. What if you were like, say you're trying to go 70% and then you go into an interval that's supposed to be 100, but then it's not, because very few of us can actually go there, because 100 is 100, right? It's not like really that attainable. I mean, like, what does that even mean? I mean, you can't
hold it. It's all about the duration you're going to hold. Like, how long? It's 100% of the effort you can hold for X amount of time.
I know, but I feel like a lot of times most of us don't really go to 100. So maybe we're going to 90 or whatever that equates to, and then you come back down and then you're at 70 again. So you're like, wait, how was it 100? Now I'm at technically 80, but you're really at 70. So, but you know what I mean? So I'm trying to,
I think the question everyone
raise that zone 2 or raise that.
Yeah, I think that the question everyone needs to ask, and I had this in one of our athletes that's training for Coeur d'Alene, sent me an email and she was like, you say 90 to 95% effort here. I'm pretty sure it's what you mean, but is that really what you mean? And I was like, yes, that is in fact what I mean, because her hesitation was, well, there's 3 intervals here at the very end of a very, very, very long bike ride. And her thought was, well, what if I can't? Or what if I am unable to complete it? I don't want to miss the intention of the workout. And my response is, well, if you're hedging your intervals, all of them, you've already missed the intention of the workout, because you're not doing what's intended, which is to go 99% effort the entire time. We've become so obsessed with improvement in numbers day to day, interval to interval, week to week, that you fail to remember that adaptation still occurs when you go, like we've talked about this a ton on the podcast, that, if 1 week you're, take a 3-week block, for example, and you do a Tuesday hard ride, you just came off recovery block, and let's say you do the same intervals and your average for all the intervals was like 220. And then the next week, they're 220, 221, and then in the final week of your block, they're like, 218, 219. You're like, oh, I'm getting slower. I didn't complete it. And you're like, dude, you just worked out for like 3 weeks in a row with like 10 or 12 hours a week. It's called accumulated fatigue. Like, good things still happen. The intent of the workout is to pay attention, write it down if you need to write it down, pull over on the side of the street if you need to, get out a pen and paper, borrowing from your kid at the kitchen table. The intent is to do your best. It's not about failing. It's not about falling short. It's not about bonking. It's not about what if I see a number that's lower, because there's not an expectation within there. The intent is within the effort. And if you are already afraid that you're going to fail, then the intent is gone, because you're going to hedge your bet. You're not going to go 90, 95%. You're going to go 80 to 85 to protect yourself or protect your ego or protect your fear of failing from the expectation. So you're already decided you're not going to. So you've already decided, and you've already basically put it in motion that it's not going to be completed, because you're so afraid that you're not going to hit the interval because you decided to go way lower just so you can hit on the last one. That's not the point. The point is to do your best and then see what happens. And I think so many athletes do this in races too, is that you're never, why are you so afraid to bonk? Why are we so afraid? We don't get paid for this. This is a hobby. We do this for fun. Professionals make their money by winning races, by going for broke, by sponsors that give them, X amount of money for these great placings. And they tend to care less about bonking than age groupers do, who don't get paid jack to race. They're not worried about protecting their ego. They're worried about doing the best they can on race day. Yet, when you hop into like the age group field, you see so many times athletes absolutely petrified to put it online because I don't know. What are you worried about? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid is going to happen if you push that line and fall short? And you might, right? And then learn your lesson, but at least you've learned, and now you know what it feels like to go to that level instead of basically avoiding it for whatever reason, whether it's being uncomfortable, you're afraid of it, whether it's you're afraid you're not going to meet your expectations, whether you're afraid what people are going to say about me if I bonk or if I DNF, because I got to have this rotation I got to upkeep. What are you afraid of? Because if that's the focus of your race or your training or whatever it is, then you're never ever going to reach your full potential, because you're always going to be hedging your bets and playing it safe and never be willing to give it your all.
Right when you're saying that, it took me back to my infamous statement about don't walk on the run, because
I remember that. Still getting hate mail.
But it makes sense if you think about it. It's sort of like you go out there and, probably the second most uncomfortable thing I've ever done in this sport. It was my first Ironman at Wisconsin. I got off the bike and I was like, there is no way. I'd only run maybe 14 miles before that. And I got off that bike and I seriously felt like I could not hardly run at all. And that was the most uncomfortable thing ever, but I ran the whole marathon and it, for me paid off and got me kind of what I wanted. But if I would have walked, it would have been just like, domino effects. I would have started walking more and more and more, but it was super painful. I think if you go into it and you've got maybe a plan to do a walk, run, attack, that's where I'm kind of compromising on this, because if that's what you got and, you feel like that can actually be lead to your best run, I have no problem with that whatsoever. I've actually seen it in action and I think it can work. But the bottom line is like, like you said, we're not pros. So I think we get into this thing about like, man, this is like really making me uncomfortable. And I don't want my life to be this uncomfortable. But we forget about how hard that race is. It's just like clockwork every time, it's like everybody's like stoked. They feel good. They train well. They think they got it made. And then they get on that run and it's just like, I'm out on runs a lot with my video camera, and I've seen so many runs in this sport. It's just incredible. Like, I know most of these people, just that are on the first lap walking and they can't, it's the worst day and they can't do anything about it. I know they came in thinking they were going to do good. But at some point, they have to figure out a way, I think, just to realize that it is going to hurt, unless it's an injury that's going to, set you back for, a long time or whatever. It's just a normal pain of like, inflammations or whatever they are, you got to make that call on your own, but it just hurts. People,
we discussed this very, very briefly in kind of in a roundabout way on Tuesday's podcast, when I mentioned having a conversation with one of our other coaches, Nicole, who came in from the Woodlands, and she was saying about how the more you go through in life, the easier it is to push in racing. And I think that all goes back to, and I 100% agree, that it raises your bar, right? It raises your bar of what's uncomfortable, what's painful, what's impossible, what's a real obstacle and what's not. You know, like, and I know athletes who, I could name them, I won't. It's like you got athletes that, are super inconsistent because life is so hard and they can't get all their sessions in. But then when it comes to race day where nothing, like, it's their day, right? There's, work isn't going to call, or they're not going to have anything going on. It's like, this is my time. Mm-hmm. They will oftentimes outperform the perfect Pats of the world who have, and there's nothing negative. Like, if you have a great life, then congrats. Like, like, that's awesome. But I think you might have to work harder to dig deeper. And you have an athlete who has had a great lead up, no injuries, no really life's obstacles, goes into the race with perfect lead up and all these expectations, and then they underperform. Because I generally think there's not just from a difference in ability to handle pain, but it's how you can overcome and how you look at obstacles, or how you look at failure. Like when you go through life and you've gone through so many difficult things, other things in life tend to you're like, that doesn't bother me, right? Like, but you talk to someone who hasn't had those things, you're like, this is the end of the world. Yeah. You're like, dude, this is a Tuesday for me. Like, you have, and that same thing goes for how you train and how you race. And this isn't like, I'm not obviously not advocating for you to have a horrible life, but I'm saying, like, it allows you to, you become, I think people always say, like, oh, they're just really calloused, and they say that in a bad way, right? But I think there's a certain level of resiliency that comes with just navigating life's unpredictable, sometimes awfulness. Like you and I were both talking, I think it was maybe after the cast on Tuesday or Wednesday, just, in between doing whatever, or maybe it was over lunch, about just like, how many, because we work with so many different athletes, is like, dude, I don't know how many like people you've seen, get divorced this year, who have lost a loved one, who have had kids go through horrible things, I had like a month ago, I had like 3 athletes in 1 week all to put their dog down. And like, you think about like how hard life is, and that's why sometimes like I'll get on to like my athletes when like I'll get one text 1 minute that's like something horrific, like actually horrific, like in life that's happened, that's real, so impossibly hard to get over. And then the next 30 seconds later, somebody's like, hey, do you think it's okay to move my bike and my run? You're like, yes, that's fine. That's like way down the list in the terms of like things that's like, that's going to, mess up your life. But that, like, life is just hard. And I think that when you go through a lot, racing becomes something different, right? It becomes not this defines me, but this defines me as a person, which I think unfortunately, I think a lot of triathletes have gone that direction. Like, triathlon defines me. My race performances define me. My completions, my how many Ironman I've done is define me. If I'm qualifying for whatever it is, it defines me. My times, my PRs, those define me. Whereas a lot of athletes choose racing as an opportunity to express who they've become and what they've gone through, and as a way to express, honestly, like, to be happy. Because when they get to go race, it's like everything is gone. And to be honest with you, like, that is, I've talked about this numerous times, that my full PR is still from way back when I was, before I got sober, and pretty close. I think I may have ended up beating at some point my 70.3, but some of my best performances were back then. And now that I kind of think about it, some of it has to do with, I think, the pain, but I think some of it also had to do with, like, it was my day to, like, escape from reality. And the pain of the day was really nothing compared to the pain that I had in, like, the lead ups. And I could, I would go through and have these races that were very, very good. And it was really obviously a fine line back then for me of, like, balancing, like, how much pain I was in for, like, emotionally and mentally. It's like what I would be able to sustain physically, but the pain, like the joy of race day was like, I felt normal again. Like, I felt like it was my time. Like, I didn't worry about what was going on in my life, or how much I didn't like it, or how depressed I was, or how anxious I was. It was like, all the pain I had there was like nothing compared to real life. And so I feel like I not did better, but I was able to overcome and maybe push more than I would because it was like a relief. And so I think that obviously if you go through hard periods in your lifetime when you race again, I do think that bar and that level of that baseline of discomfort has changed for your willingness to push past that level, because you're like, dude, this feels good to me compared to like what I might be going through in real life. And so if you maybe don't have that, I don't think there's a scientific study out there to prove that, but I 100% believe it, having gone through it and watched athletes over the years, is, if the things are going great, that's also awesome, because you can then, I think, use that level of decreased stress and decreased emotional and mental turmoil. You should be fresh, but also I think it takes practice to like get back into like really, really, really digging deep, because you're like, dude, life is great. Like, do I really want to keep doing this? Like I don't have, again, we do this as a hobby. Do I really want to do this right now? Because I don't have to. I could just, pull over, go hop at my Beamer, drive to my 9-to-5 job, make $400K a year, have a beautiful wife and kids, and not have a worry in the world. Why am I doing this again? Versus the guy next to you on the bike might be thinking, dude, my life is falling apart. I got nothing else going for me. I'm going to give it absolute hell today. And it's just two different mentalities, and I think not levels of pain, but just internal conversations. And I think that's why I've always said, like, I would love for race day to be like the old school, like VH1 pop-up videos, where you could see like what people were thinking in their heads and like because you think what their face says, right? And we talked the other day about people that smile on the race course, and you have the people who were smiling because they're just going to probably cruise it to the end. Then you have people who were smiling because they're like, this is my day and I am feeling it. That's just what they do. It's an internal, not a struggle, but I think it's just an internal difference of conversations that different people have on race day that ultimately get them different results.
I think we all go through different periods of fitness in this sport. We're in and out, in and out, in and out. So like, what I just went through was a year of basically just holding on, like trying to stick around in the game and whatever. And, we all want to find our comfort zone. And if you're not working out a ton, but you're still a triathlete, quote unquote, and, I think your pains become more mental, you kind of like deal with because when you start working out again and everything, your mind kind of clears up and you feel better and you can deal with the problems that you talk about easier because you're clearer and that sort of thing. But when you're going in and out of that fitness, like the pains, right? You get, they start to bother you more, like just in a weird sense, but then you start getting back into shape again, right? And then you feel good, and then maybe sort of mid-late training cycle for a race, you're starting to feel like, all right, I'm back. And then the race throws another whole avalanche of like fitness level that you need to be at. And then you're in a super pain during the race because you thought you were in great shape. And then all of a sudden the race can just suck it out. And it's all relative, right? No matter how good a shape you are, you're probably going to push that race to that level, right? So it's always going to hurt. That's what I always like. The pros, you can't tell me, they're in great shape, but you watch them race and coming down that, last 10K or whatever they are, I'm sure they're in deep pain.
Burying themselves.
So there's a lot of that kind of stuff. I wanted to we didn't really, we talked about some athletes last week, but I wanted to talk about Sam Browning because he's a great example of what we're kind of talking about. He had, 2 weeks out? He blew his ankle out?
8 weeks.
Oh, 8 weeks?
No, this could be not 8 weeks, 8 days.
Oh, 8 days.
Saturday,
so a week and a half.
2 Saturdays.
Yeah. So he blew his ankle, and it was black and blue, and it was swollen like a grapefruit and everything like that. And everybody, he wasn't, I don't know if he was sure he was going to race or not, but he ended up, and I always joke with Sam, I always talk about like this concept of, you got pain, well, just don't think about it. Like I'm a really good compartmentalizer,
yeah.
But I think there is something to it, like if you harp on, like I've been doing that with my shoulder. I've been just obsessed with it. Right. And finally I just said, you know what, I'm just going to go start doing stuff and working it out. And I'm finally getting to the point where it's still weak, but I've pushed through a lot of the pain, and it's kind of coming back. And
I haven't heard you talk about it in a
right,
while.
yeah. See, so and I haven't been thinking about it. It's still kind of lingering around every once in a while. But like with Sam, I was just so impressed because that thing, I don't know, most people probably wouldn't race. I mean, especially because he had probably pretty high expectations, and he ended up, I thought, with an exceptional run based on the condition of that ankle. It was black and blue and taped up and everything like that. But I like the idea of, when we get these niggles or these injuries and things like that, or we have stuff bugging, how do you not think about it? And a lot of times it's just like shifting perspective and getting out of that. And because how many times, I was on that run, my IT band was whatever. And that always happens, and I've had it. And I remember one time specifically in an Ironman, it was here in Chattanooga, and I came up Battery Lane, and on the second loop, and my IT band started bugging me, and it had been in and out that whole summer. And I said, nope, I'm not going to let it.
Not today.
I'm not going to let it. We had, what do you have, 5 miles after that on the full? And it's the hilliest part of the course. I said, nope, I'm not thinking about that at all. And I just sort of thought it away. And I don't, whether or not that's real or not, but I just think there's something to it.
There's a fine line between ignoring and obsessing, and I think that's what a lot, I told you this, I think maybe last week or the week before, there's an athlete I work with who we couldn't get his ankle just really, really healthy for whatever reason. I said, dude, what are you wearing? He's like, I'm wearing like I'm wearing calf sleeves, like a compression socks. And I'm also wearing, one of those like ankle braces you get from, Walgreens. That's like, a suit of armor, like it allows no motion whatsoever. And I was like, dude, take it all off. Stop. Just take it off. I think it's just preventing your ankle from getting stronger because you're literally not having to use any muscles, tendons, like anything. You're just basically just like, it's losing its appropriate. I didn't say you're killing it, but I was like, you're doing yourself a disservice. Take it off. He was like, I don't really. And he is like, I'll be a good athlete. He didn't say anything. And he took it off and went for a run. He texted back. He was like, I'm not going to lie, man. I've never once questioned you in the last few months we've ever worked together, but I questioned you today. But damn it, you were right. And he's been brace free ever since. Running, it's like I do. I think and obviously injuries are injuries for a reason. They are legit. But you can think something into being worse, and that's just a fact. You can obsess about it. You can. And a lot of people do that. Like they come back from an injury and they have these like phantom pains because they're expecting to feel something. Then you probably will feel something. And I think that's also like part of the legend that is like the taper, phantom pains. It's like there really isn't a pain there. You're just expecting, to have something or to have this happen. But you can, you can't ignore away an injury. But I think you can, distract yourself a lot better than people think. And maybe that's a good cue for athletes who struggle with, digging. The pain is like, I know when I'm digging the deepest on the bike specifically, is like I don't think about the pain of the actual action that I'm doing. I think about a different period of my life that was either more painful, or on the contrary, I think about like a really, really happy moment of my life, or a happy moment that I want to have that maybe I'm working towards, whether it's like, the picture of you at a finish line with your kids or whatever it is. Like that's what I think we should focus on instead of like the actual pain that's physically happening in the moment. Go back to a period, and we've discussed before, is like, most people say the most painful thing they've ever gone through in life is something that's happened to them mentally and emotionally, and not physically. It's not going to be like, oh, it was that sweet spot workout I did back in October of 2017. No, it's going to be like, it was just, I went through this period of my life where everything was just incredibly hard. And, I think it's an important thing to think about when you do these hard things. It's not to so much focus on and obsess about how uncomfortable and painful it is, but kind of disassociate yourself away to something that's either really, really happy or good, and focus on that. Then maybe it's worth it. Or go back to, if you have, on the other hand, you have these periods where you're like, God, it was so painful. If I can do that, I can do this. Because in the scheme of things, is this really as bad as what I got through before? No, it's not even like in the same ballpark.
Mm-hmm. And back to your distracting or the relief of a race. I when you were talking about that, all I could think about was when I worked in the news business. It was like, man, I think, you deal with stuff like that, that's like grinding you down on the daily. And then you finally get a way to like, it literally is that, even though you're not going to the beach and sitting by a tiki hut, you're going off to this place that is just, the safe zone of other triathletes and they understand you. And that's all you're talking about. And you're kind of like, and it's like a major escape. So you get to these races and that was kind of the clue, the ultimate clue. And I ended up quitting my job, a couple of years into the sport because I think it sort of was like woke me up to the point where, man, if I feel this good getting away from that,
right?
Why do I keep going back to it? Because I do that, 48, 49 weeks of the year, and I do triathlon 3 weeks of the year on the weekends or whatever. And it's like, man, that's like a crazy imbalance of being miserable versus being like escaping and being free and happy and doing stuff that you love. So I think eventually that kind of led to me walking away from there. And, and you had mentioned it earlier with divorces and like the different things like that. It's like, man, it's so crazy how, when you can kind of open up your world and push your body. And like, I always talk about breaking up the rocks inside, because things kind of just like pile up and, you thought probably you always have like, a gut ache or some kind of stupid thing like that. And there's a reason for that, and I think triathlon sort of loosens that up a lot of times. And I think like, racing and pushing yourself past sort of some of these thresholds is like the stuff we need to do to really clarify life outside of it. It's sort of, you get done with it. We talked about before, but like, there's nothing better than finishing like on for me, it's an Ironman. Halves are great too, but like to finish an Ironman at that moment they're putting that medal on you, there is nothing that bothers you. I mean, you could be going through so much shit in your life, and then all of a sudden it's like you're not thinking about like taxes or like bills or any kind of BS. It's kind of falling down in your life at that moment. You're just all right, free. So it's like, okay, what does that feel like, and how can I have more of this? And I think that a lot of people go through this sport, and we have periods of that, smaller doses and smaller bites of it throughout the way, and it kind of like over time adds up, or we can kind of start to recognize those things more often, and then we start becoming ourselves really a little bit more, because it's life can really sort of put you in this thing where you just become this 9-to-5 worker, and then all of a sudden you look around 15, 20 years later, and you're like, what the hell, what am I doing? And it doesn't have to be, I'm not saying like you quit and open a triathlon training center like we did, but
not recommended.
There could be many other options or whatever. I mean, life's short. Let's figure out what really works for us. And, we have the thing, happy and healthy, and you could also add pain.
But happy and healthy doesn't come with risk. And I think that's like an important, like people, you're talking about careers and jobs and people's professions, and I think a lot of us in life have become, just content, right? You're like, people's new baseline, a lot of people's baseline now with a lot of things in life is, I'm just fine. Like, this is fine. Is it great? No. Am I happy? Not really. Am I pleased, and do I get energy from what I'm doing? No, but it's okay. It pays the bills, or, I just, I don't really, I'm scared to do something different, or I don't know what's out there, and that's become like everyone's new baseline, instead of like the endless pursuit of being happy, right? And pushing yourself and trying to figure out what's really best for yourself, and taking that risk to figure it out, and that's the risk you take on race day, is like the risk in figuring out exactly what I have today versus I think I'd be okay with this. Like I can massage my way to justifying that this was an okay day, and then I'll sleep tonight and it'll be fine. Versus doing what's necessary and taking the calculated risk to think, yeah, but was it the best that I had today? And what might that feel like to have the best? And that goes for training and in life. Like if you're just to be, content and not to work and work and work, and then you literally never know what you will achieve, what you're capable of, what you can do, with life. And that goes, the same thing goes with training and in racing is if you always hedge your bet and you always protect yourself by, but I'm okay being okay. Like, that's okay. Then maybe it's time to snap out of that. And maybe it's time to think, maybe I'm not okay being okay. Maybe I'd really actually like to be the happiest version of myself. Or maybe I'd actually like to be, a better at triathlon. And if in order to do that, maybe I need to find out exactly how good I really am, right now, because, training, prepares you for race day, but it's not race day. And on race day, figure it out and find it out. That's your opportunity. That's your wide open, doors open, walk in, have at it, see what happens, instead of just kind of getting, well, that kind of looks okay in there. You know what, this is fine. I'm fine where I am. I think I'm just going to stay right here, and then we'll just try again maybe next time. Because the longer you avoid it, the harder it's going to be to finally take that plunge. Or instead of looking at the door and being like, I don't really know if I want to do that or go in there, screw it, I'm going in. And then see what happens. Then usually, that was actually a really great experience. That's a lot how racing and training and obviously that life is.
Yeah. I think contentment's a weird word because I often look at people who are content with admiration, and it just depends on what they're content with. I think a lot of us are delusionally content.
Yes.
Like we talk ourselves into being okay with that.
Right.
But if you kind of went out and really gave your all, and I always, one of my problems is I have a hard time sleeping, and I think a lot of times it is because I'm delusionally content and I don't feel like I, gave my all that day or did what I set out to do. And I think that can be applicable to races. I think people can be very, I did a good job, but they know deep down that they didn't give it their all either that day or leading up to that day. Yeah. So that kind of stuff wears us thin, I think, over time. And the only way to do that is really I always talk about Ironman as an analogy for life. Sort of if you break down that whole day, you wake up and you go and you're happy and everything's good, and then you kind of cruise in the swim a little bit and you have fun and wake up, and then it starts getting harder and harder and harder. And I think that if we can make, something like our day's mini Ironman, way mini, but approach them in the sense of you really kind of gave it all that particular day, whatever that means.
Content is the wrong word. It's at peace. I think is a better way, because I do agree with you. Some people I see they're so content. It's not that they're complacent, right? Maybe, and that's another better word to use. It's they're just complacent with progression and wanting. But are you at peace with it? Are you really at peace with where you are in life? That's a great thing, right? That's a really, really if truly at peace with where you are, that's a great thing. Same things with, are you at peace with the effort you put in on race day or in a workout? Are you really at peace with that? Because that's a much harder question, right? That's one of those are races that keep you up at night. Not the ones you were content on, but the ones you're I had it that day and I couldn't pull the trigger. I mentioned that, I think just in, not on the podcast, but I think when we had a bunch of athletes here at the hub the day or two before 70.3 or for Chattanooga, they started talking about Ohio, and I said that was the one besides Chattanooga 70.3, even though it ended up well for me that year, but Ohio, that's one of those that haunts me because I couldn't find it within myself to go to that next deep pocket of super uncomfortability till the second lap. And by the second lap, it was too late. I think I ended up 7th or 8th in my age group that day, and I was 2 minutes out of second. And all I could think about was the fact that even though I felt pretty good, my fitness was really, really good, I stopped and used the Porta-John on the first rest stop before the Red Bull aid station. And then I walked the next one because I was you just don't have it today. And it wasn't because I didn't have it from the neck down. I didn't have it from the chin. And then finally, I think we had a bunch of athletes racing that day. I think I remember I come behind Nate Davis and somebody else. And they said something, and for whatever reason, it just kind of clicked. And I was like, F it, I'm just going to see. And then I just ripped it. And I gave it everything I had, but it was too late. And I just think it's and so I'm at peace with that last lap, but I'm not at peace with the first lap of that run. And that's just one of those things where you can have it all. You can have all of it from a fitness standpoint, but if you don't have the willingness to go there, then you're never going to actually get as far as you want to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, And that's what makes it so awesome, right? It's always a challenge to, I really do. I mean, it's like, yeah, and it does translate to the day to day, right? Do you have enough, what it takes to go do this right now? Or, I don't know, man. But I do think it's it's an ongoing process. We always struggle with it. It's always going to be hard. And
life is hard. It is hard.
Yeah. But just keep going.
Just keep moving on. That's it. That's all we got for a Friday. We hope you have an amazing holiday weekend. I'm sure we'll be back Monday or Tuesday because we don't have any holidays. But we're at peace and content with where we are in the podcast universe.
I just saw the neighbor out there. That just reminded me of that. Yeah. And she goes, "Happy Friday." And I go, "Yeah, happy Friday." And she goes, "I bet every day's like a Friday to you."
And you're like, "No."
I was like, not. "Well, every day's like a Friday or a Monday."
Yeah, it's written in between.
It's like I feel like
I get like 4 Mondays a week, I feel
I was actually thinking, it was a big holiday weekend. I said, I'm going to get a chance to edit some video this weekend for the podcast or whatever. I'm not really looking forward to going out on lakes or anything like that. I'm just going to be.
I'm not laking either.
It's kind of like, holiday weekend means we can kind of
here tomorrow morning.
Work out.
Actually, that's right. I'll be in here doing someone else's tomorrow morning. That's right. How I choose to spend my holidays. We appreciate you. We love you. We'll check you back either on Monday or Tuesday. Don't forget, head over to our website, c26triathlon.com, for all things coaching, camps, and community. You can follow us on social media. On Facebook, we're Crushing Iron Group. On Instagram, we are C26 Triathlon. If you have any questions for Mike, he is at crushingiron@gmail.com. If you have any questions for me, you can get in contact with me at c26coach@gmail.com.
Yeah. And hey, one quick question. We had a inquiry about the club, and it's a 12-month program, so it doesn't go through from now until the end of this year. Now, whenever you sign up for the club, it's like 12 months.
You get 12.
So if you want to do a 70.3 this year and then come back and do chat 70.3, you're in business.
You're in business. Yeah, maybe we'll just edit that on the website if it's more clear.
Yeah.
Or clarity is great.
Yeah, because nobody's going to stand out. Hello, is anybody out there? All right, man. I'll catch you later. See you.